Grounds art subscription packs. These are offered through Fantasy Grounds. They have been created and generated by Josh Watmough. He is a Smiteworks employee and a great artist. He creates these packs for use for the Fantasy Grounds platform, and they can be purchased as a subscription, or you can buy them a la carte separately. One of the benefits of basically buying it for $50 a month is that it keeps growing. So every year he puts out at least 4 to 6 different map packs, depending on how much time and what's involved with them. The other thing is that you want to remember is if you cancel your subscription, you won't have any access to those assets. So if you start, if you basically get rid of the subscription, if you have images that you've edited and added things to, it just won't display. There might even be question marks or something in there. How frequently? So basically, they try to add new packs every month. That isn't always the case, but usually. There are individual purchases if you want to buy them outright, or you can buy them through the art subscription. So kind of pick your battles on that one. But for $5 a month, that's $60 roughly. And then for for doing this for a year is $50. So I think that alone is already a pretty good pick. But you can do one or the other, and you may not find yourself using them that much. So maybe $50 isn't your thing, but you can either subscribe or you can do the whole year, or you can individually purchase these as needed. So if you want to go through some of these, like recent ones for this last year, he put out a steampunk vehicles pack. There's a chase pack where this background actually moves, so like you can make it look like, kind of set up the illusion of movement. There's a haunted interiors pack, and then there's a haunted places pack. So these were both released right before Halloween, which is really timely. And then there's this volcanic pack. They got the countryside pack. There's the grasslands map pack, and it looks like some of the completed map packs that Josh has created over the months. So there's 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So those are all maps that he's built in his live streams, and then he shares those as completed maps. So he puts a good couple hours into these. So there's also map packs that are set up for different environments. There's different genres. There's a decal pack. I mean, these things are pretty cool. They do have a lot of stuff that you may or may not use depending on what your needs are, but essentially these are a pretty good value overall. I don't feel like I'm being ripped off when I'm using these. And there are some limitations. Like I said, the subscription, if you cancel it, you won't have access to it. However, taking a look at these things, I've seen a lot of different usages and feedback, and it just kind of depends on what your needs are. But if you want to see how the packs are actually used, you can visit Josh's stream, which is live on YouTube and all the other Twitch, and you can interact with them, ask questions, and then he kind of goes through the assets, the newer ones, every week, or he even adds some of the older ones in, and he kind of shows you how to use these. Matter of fact, this last week, he showed you how you can build something and then export it out of Fantasy Grounds as a completed project, so you don't have to rebuild it every time. So you technically can build your own assets with the asset packs. By now, you can actually export these out of Fantasy Grounds. So that's kind of a new thing. Over the last few months, they've released that capability where you can export your images so that you can use them outside of Fantasy Grounds, which actually increases the value even more. Before that, they were kind of, baked in. You couldn't do anything with them, but outside of Fantasy Grounds. So this is a pretty good way to kind of get an understanding of what you're getting. Going through this big list here of all the different map packs may be a little daunting. And it's kind of hard to tell what you have and those sort of things. But our next stage is we'll actually go into Fantasy Grounds. But I wanted to show you some of the resources. So you have this art subscription pack. You have the videos to help you understand kind of what you're getting. And, you may not have a couple hours to watch these, but you can go back through them. And if there's a particular pack or some kind of topic that you're interested in, you can go back in and watch these. So the other thing is, this is a free extension. I wouldn't necessarily promote this for a new user, but if you're comfortable with extensions and you kind of know what you're doing, you can take these, and this particular extension is free, and you can add it to Fantasy Grounds to help you keep track of all of your used assets that you're using in your maps. You can already do that in Fantasy Grounds up to a point, but it's not as obvious or as wieldy as you know, as this extension. Basically, it gives you a place to put all your assets when you're working with map packs and such. And then the map I'm going to use today is part of this Venmire Woods pack. This doesn't have line of sight already baked into it. This is an older map pack that's been out for a few years. It was released on 2019, so it's pretty old. The reason I chose this because I like the art style, but I also want to show you, how to use some of the content. So this is basically the pack that I'm using on the show for the map. So these are your resources. So you have the videos for how to use the assets and what they look like, and kind of, some best practices on how to use the map tools. Then you have this extension if you want to use it. So if you get into building and creating maps, you'll have this extension to help you organize your assets better. And then, of course, here's the art subscription and the art packs. And then Venmire Woods is just one of a whole bunch of map packs that are available in the store. Most of them have line of sight built into them, especially the official content. But the stuff that's put out by third parties is kind of up to them if they want these updated. So if you buy a map pack that comes from an indie publisher, you might have to add the line of sight yourself. But that is just because this stuff came out way before the mapping tools came out. So this is the resources, and I'll have all these in the links at the end of the video. So what we're going to do is bring up Fantasy Grounds, and I have a kind of a session set up here. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the assets first. So generally speaking, if you have a map or you're going to create a map, you're going to want to add that to Fantasy Grounds, and you would do so in the assets window, which is over here on the right. So the assets is basically your portal into all of your content. So you have images, portraits, and tokens. So they all are kind of separate folders on the back end of Fantasy Grounds. And when you actually add images to the to Fantasy Grounds, it will create a new folder called Campaign, and that will be your basic images that you will be importing and stuff that you're using in your campaign. That's like third party or stuff that you've made, or whatever you're going to add to your campaign. In this case, I'm going to be using a module, which is a map pack that I purchased that I showed earlier, the Venmire Woods 2. So in the modules area, I have the Venmire Woods loaded. These are map packs that do not have line of sight baked into them yet. So these are the reason I chose these, because I want to show how that process works. The other thing about the assets is this is also where all of your map pack your subscription that you're going to have, and there's a couple free ones too, by the way. If you haven't used Fantasy Grounds yet, there are a few map asset packs that come with Fantasy Grounds. I don't remember what they're called. There's like 3 or 4 of them. They were part of the original Kickstarter. But nonetheless, the best way to access the map packs is to utilize the search tool. So just go FG with a space, because you have to have 3 characters, and a space is considered a character. And then you hit enter, it will go through and sort these out. So these are basically all of the different map packs kind of sorted by title that are available in Fantasy Grounds. So this, if you have an art subscription, this will be what you'll have access to. There's just tons of them. The problem with this is you got to go through these and see what's in them to kind of utilize what's there. So what I typically would do is search for something. So I have a map of a forest lake, and I want to get some assets to go with this. So I want some fish, maybe some butterflies, something to kind of make the map look more interesting. So this is where this can get a little cumbersome, and this is where you might want to do a little of this work before your game starts. And then also, obviously, when you're building your own stuff. So in this, in here, you can kind of go through these and you can hover over and you get kind of like a basic description, but you're still not really going to know what's in what. I mean, there's really no catalog photo at this point. So it is very difficult to kind of go and navigate through these bags full of stuff. So what I normally do is, for instance, I know there's a water pack or some kind of thing with water. So I'm gonna type in animation or animated. Let's see, animation. Let's try that. Animated. That's another good search term if you want the stuff that's animated in Fantasy Grounds. So animated or animation. Got to make sure I'm in the right. Okay, so that's not what I'm looking for. So I'm going to go back to home, and let's go with fish, because that's what I really wanted. Okay, so basically the fish are a kind of an animated asset that comes with one of the packs. I believe it's the coastal one. So when you're searching for these, you might have to be a little bit more, a little bit more descriptive, but there's the animated fish up here. So what we had done before to kind of keep this organized is you take the left click and drag and put your assets down here on the toolbar. But what you'll find is after you do all your searching and you find all the assets you want to use, this fills up rather quick. So using this little palette and then the palette assets here, this is the extension. So what this does is this is an extension that I got off the Forge for free. So if you come up here and go to the Forge, this is Bane's Joy of Painting asset management tool. So what this does is it allows for you to basically take your assets, instead of putting them all down here in the hotkeys, you can drag them to this particular palette. So you make your own group, and then you will take that and you will drag the assets that you want to use for your project. So in this case, I want the fish, so I'll drag that over here. And then maybe, let's see. Oh, I wanted the water. So we'll see what that does. So there's a kind of a glimmering water asset that I wanted to use. It's animated. Yeah, I'm getting this error because I have an asset in there that's got a title that's way too long. It's a third-party asset, so that's on me. Let's see. So you want to look through your assets and kind of do this ahead of time before you start a project. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm looking at all the different assets that I have. Now, you may or may not have all of these different assets, and I'd recommend that you actually organize them so you don't have to go through this as much. So crane, anchor, eagle, fish, cross. Yeah, I don't know about that. See, when I'm doing this, it's looking at these titles, and if they're too long, it's giving me grief because of the name of it is too long. So that's why I'm getting those errors. So this isn't Fantasy Grounds' assets; these are mine, and I have to go back and rename those because it's giving me grief because it doesn't like the long title. If you have a title that's like 50 characters long, it won't handle that. So that's kind of something that you should be aware of. So if you're going to name your assets, see, these are really long: heraldry, medieval, coat, crest, king, princess. I mean, that's a huge long title. That's just way too big. So that's why I'm getting so much grief with this search engine. That's why it's pausing and giving me all kinds of grief because I have assets that are named with too many characters. So you got to be careful with that. All right, so basically you can get images from wherever your assets that you have in your inventory. And see, here are some animated splashes. So maybe I want to use one of these. Oops, I got to unlock it. There we go. Okay, so nonetheless, you'll be dragging these things over when you can, and you use this to kind of, kind of organize your setup so you're not constantly trying to figure this out during a game or in the middle of something. And then I wanted to see if I can figure out this. Let's see. Let me try waves. I think that's what I wanted. Yeah, here we go. So here's the wave shore. Here's waves decor. Yeah, so these are things that you might use, if you were going to in this picture here. So that's just kind of a way that you can collect all your stuff here. And then the other tab is for tokens. So if let's say you wanted your spiritual weapon or something like a torch. So I'm going to do that as you should always have a torch at least. So I want to make sure I spell it right. So again, you have to use 3 or more letters, and you do have to spell it correctly, or it's not going to give you the right information. I keep mistyping it. Okay, so with torch, I have all these different assets here. So I'm just going to grab this one and drag and drop that onto the palette. So there's a torch, and let's go with a spiritual weapon. So this would probably be like a spell token of some sort. Yeah, so here are the spiritual weapons. So maybe your character or cleric or someone has a baton, an axe. Let's see what else we got here. I was looking, here we go. So here's Moradin's hammer. You could do something like that, or you can use the spiritual weapon 5-foot radius thing here. These are spell tokens, so you can drag that up there. So it just depends on what your needs are, but this little tool here is helpful when you want to add assets or tokens, and you can kind of store them and have them available to you. And another thing is that I actually linked it to the map. So if you take this this particular palette and drag and drop the link to the map, you can bring that up and it will bring all those assets up. So that's a really handy little tool there. All right, so what I'm going to do is add some of this stuff. So just I'm not going to do a full tutorial on how to do line of sight and a map, but I'm going to show you some of the use cases here. So first things first, this map doesn't have any line of sight built into it, but I do know that it's 50 by 50 pixels per square. So I'm going to go and set the grid. So the first thing to do is turn on the grid. And as you can see, it lines up here in the corners and it's to scale. And then I'm going to change the color of the grid to like kind of a yellowish color, and then kind of play with the opacity so it's not too bright or too crazy. And then that's the real basics right there. Now you could add line of sight to this map if you wanted to. I don't think I would need very much. I think maybe a couple things on these trees would probably be the most you'd ever need on this. So make sure I have the map highlighted, the actual map layer, and then go to the line of sight tool, come into terrain, and then draw out just a little areas here where the trees might block some of the light. And that's about it. You don't really need a whole lot. So I'll just go to the line tool, and I'm just going to kind of click around in these centers. I don't really need a whole huge whopping tree here because you're just kind of doing the tree trunks essentially. So you might do something like that on a map that's this simple, so you don't have to go through every little edge, because that's basically kind of a waste. And you just kind of need to show that there's a little bit of blockage there, not really anything spectacular. Now I'm going to add the water effect to this nice looking pond here. So the water effects are something you got to be kind of picky and choosy about. I think those have a little bit more overhead, so I wouldn't put a ton of effects on here, but the water, just one layer shouldn't be too bad. So if I go to the effects layer, it adds a blank effects layer, and then I come up to the top, and I'm going to pick the water. So this is the water thing here, and once we hit this blur thing, you'll see that it's moving, kind of distorts the map. So With that, you don't really want this entire map to be moving like that. You kind of just want it in the water. So what we're going to do is put a mask on it, which covers it essentially. And then we're just going to unveil just the parts that we want to have that kind of warping look to it. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and left click and drag this around the periphery here. And I'm just going to kind of draw this out kind of roughly. It doesn't have to go right to the edge, because it actually pulls in the images from the edge of the map, like the trees and stuff. So I just kind of put it basically in the center, and I put a little bit of blur on it, and then you can mess around with the speed and then the intensity. You can do stuff like that to kind of make this look more realistic. So that kind of gives you that kind of wavy kind of look to it, which will basically kind of give you the illusion that there's movement there. And then for the fish part of this, so there's some fish, some animated fish. So I can drag and drop that to the map, but I'd prefer to actually go to layers. I'm going to drop the animated fish into this layer tool instead. So if you drag it straight to the map, nothing wrong with that, but you don't have a lot of control over the size of it, especially if you're not familiar with this asset. You're really not going to know like what exactly it is and what it does. So it's better to drag and drop it up here into this tile area, and it's a 12 by 25. So that's 12 squares by 25. That's a lot for this map. So I think I'm going to drop it down to maybe 4. And when I click on that, it says 4 by 8. So maybe I'm just going to go to 2, which is 2 squares wide by 4 length. And then I'm just going to take and kind of stamp it somewhere. And let's see what we get. So yeah, so there's the little fish right there. So what we can do now is go to the selection tool. So I don't want to stay in the tile tool because that will stamp another version of it. And then I could take this and move this and then actually rotate it if I want. So I can, rotate it out here. So it'll look like these fish are kind of disappearing into the deeper depths here. I can actually put this fish underneath the water layer. So in case it doesn't look like they're floating on top of the water, it looks like they're under more. And then here's some animated waves. So maybe I want to put a little bit of waves like where these little pockets are. So what I'll do is I'll take the wave and drag and drop it over here onto the tile. And then from here, I can decide like, okay, it's 20 by whatever. That's pretty big. So I'm going to go with, again, I'm going to go with like 3 maybe. And then I'm going to click here and we'll see what we get. So there's the waves. So they don't really look like they're working too well with this because I got to rotate it. So I'm going to go back to the selection tool, make sure that I have the waves selected, and I'm just going to rotate it kind of more of a diagonal pattern. And there we go. And then I'm going to move it. So I'll take the asset here and take this and move it up 1. So you kind of get the impression that it's washing up on the shore. So that's just kind of a way to make this map come to life. So this is why I like the art asset pack. So even if you're not able to design an entire map, it's nice to have some assets to embellish what you already have. So again, I'll click over here to place another tile. And then it's kind of going the wrong way. So I'm going to rotate it. You got to make sure that you're in the selection mode and that you have this tile selected. And now I'm just gonna, see, I got to turn it some more. There we go. Now I'm going to bring it in so it looks more like it's on the shoreline and not out in the middle of there we go. So as it gets closer to the shallows, that will show up there. And it kind of looks like it's going the wrong direction too. Let me see that. Yeah, so I need to flip it the other way. So you have the flip tool where you can actually, you can change the direction of it. Let's see if that will work. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Okay, so I'm going to rotate this out. See what that looks like. Yeah, that's better. And then I'll take this and drag it into the shoreline more. There we go. So that's kind of neat. And if it looks like it's overwhelming, like too big or something, you can always, you can kind of shrink it. And then you can use the opacity tool to kind of blend it in a little more, so it's not as, not as strong, essentially. And that way you can kind of blend it into the map a little bit better. So that'd be the same thing over here. I can go to the fish. These look a little bit like too much. So what I'll do is I'll select the animated fish and then go up to this tool up here and kind of blend them in. So you can make it a little bit more transparent, so it's not so obvious, it's like sticking out. And then I'll do the same thing with those waves. So come up here, and then what I'll do is I'm clicking on the tint and kind of lowering the opacity a little bit so it blends in better with the image on hand. So this is kind of a way that you can use these assets to your advantage. They will grow. So even if you were bought into Fantasy Grounds a long time ago, it may not have been worth the $50 or whatever it was at that time. But as time goes on, you're going to get more and more assets that you can work with. So now I want to get some birds in here. So again, I'm going to go to the assets thing, the link for that, and I want to type in _ animated. I think that was a better search term. Let's go with birds. Okay, bird. Let's try that. Yeah, so you're going to get mixed results depending on what you search for. So I'm going to do animation, I think, is the search term I'm looking for. Yeah, but anyway, so if you wanted the animated birds, you would look for those. And right now it's giving me all these data information because I have a ton of assets. So be careful with that, because if you get too many assets, it gets really difficult to search through Fantasy Grounds. And that's one thing that I'm noticing a lot in the community is as we get larger and larger collections, they get more and more unwieldy. So we got to kind of be careful with that. But so anyways, you can add assets, however you feel is good. So I want to find that flock of birds. No, let's try bird. We did that, but I didn't see oh, here they are. Birds under decorations. So again, I'm going to put it in the tile area, and it's 20 by 20. So it's going to take up quite a bit of room, but that's all right, because what I might do is I'm going to just click on the center and make it look like the birds are flying closer to the camera. So if you go like that, that looks pretty good. Like the birds are circling around fishing for food. And then you can go up to the tint tool and lower the opacity a little bit so they're not quite as banging there or too much. There you go. So that really brings this map to life. And one of the things I should have done is in the assets area, while I had this open, is search for that ahead of time and then drag it over here. And the other thing I was showing you earlier is if you wanted, let's say you wanted a campfire or something here, we can do that by dragging assets here. So let's go to assets. Let's go to campfire. Oops. Keep misspelling these. Campfire. Okay. So we have these kind of like this campfire thing. So we can drag and drop that here into, I believe it's a token. That's why it's not going in there. So let's do something else. So here's a lit campfire. Yeah, so you got to watch for, oh, I'm in all, that's why. Okay, images. Now let's do campfire. Because what'll happen is it'll give you everything instead of, because tokens are handled differently. Okay, so here we go. Here's a blank fire pit, so we'll drag that in there. And then we want to do some flames, I guess. So there's assets that you have that looks like fire or flames. So you can do something like that for this particular scene if you want to build a scene. So here's all the fire. And you can see I got 50 gazillion assets. So that makes it difficult when you search for this stuff. So try to keep your folders clean. If that's probably the best lesson I can give you. Okay, so this is here's a campfire animation. So we might want something like that. Okay, then once we're done, we can bring up, again, we're going to bring up this layers asset and then bring the fire pit and drag and drop it in here. And it looks like it's a 1x1 square, so that'll work. So maybe we have a fire set up here. And then I'm going to drag over the animated fire and drop it in there. And this thing is 8x8, so that's way too big. So we want to go with a 1x1.2. Drag that, and there we go. So if it doesn't match up, you can always go to the selection tool. You can hold the control key and drag it to where it lines up because it's trying to snap to grid. So that's what we're doing here. Okay, that looks pretty decent. And then if you want to, you can put those two in a folder. So we can call this campfire. And that way they're kind of nested together and they're not kind of all loose. So we can organize these assets just by dragging them into folders. And then that way, if I want to move this, I can. And then on top of that, if I want to place light on it, let's say I want it to actually have a radius in light, I can go to the light tool, and I want to make sure that I have this campfire selected. And then I'm going to use the preset for a torch in this case, and I click on it. So that will be all together now as an asset. So I can move this whole thing as a group. So this folder here, I can move this. Well, I got to select the folder. And I need to be in layers. There we go. So I can move this whole thing around if I want. And that way you got your campfire there. And then when we go to turn on the line of sight, this is kind of what we're getting here. So now you got the campfire. There's still the lake in the background. So this is just something you can do to kind of make things look interesting. So what's going on? Why is that fire looking like that? Okay. It's underneath, that's why. There we go. And then I'm going to move it again. So I want to make sure I got it selected. And then I want to make sure I have the assets. And then hold down the control key. Move the flames over a little bit. So now we actually have lighting and the flames at the same time. And they're all in one group. So I can highlight this and I can move this entire thing. But anyways, you get the idea. I don't like that the fire keeps resetting though. That's annoying. So this is the flames. So I want to hold control. Oops. That's the campfire. There we go. So that looks more like it's centered on the actual image. All right, so there we go. And then you can actually hide that whole thing if you, oops, wrong asset. Keep clicking on the entire map. I just want this part of it. There we go. So this folder right here, why is it taking everything with it? Oh, okay. So this shouldn't, I don't know why it's doing that. Okay, that's that, but how do I, weird. Okay, well, it could be because of something to do with the way I have it set up. But anyways, this is, normally you can turn that on or off you can turn the visibility off and on for the players. Oh, I see. I'm getting rid of the light. That's why. So it's actually dark if I get rid of that whole thing. Okay, that makes sense. And then the other thing is I wanted to show you was, like, for instance, let's say you wanted a torch. So I'm going to turn off the line of sight. momentarily. And we'll say it's someone over here through a torch. So you take the torch and you can drag it onto the map. And this is actually a token. It's not an asset. So the tokens work differently than they're on the top layer of the map. So with this token, let me see if I can find it. Where did it go? Okay, so if I click that, now this is a token. If I want to assign fire to it, or light in this case, I'm going to click on lighting, and then you want to click on the token lights, and then use the drop down for torch. And then since I have this highlighted, I'm just going to click this, and that's going to add the torch light to this. So now when I go back to the play mode and then put this line of sight back on, now we have a token that has a light on it. So that's what this is handy for, is not only for collecting your assets that you want to use, but you can also add your tokens, and these are interactable with your players. So if you have a torch that you guys throw down on the ground and you guys are fighting, you need some area to see what's going on. I mean, that would be something you could do. And then, of course, if you have a spiritual weapon, you might have someone that has that spell. You can put that down here. Maybe put a little tiny bit of glow on it. Probably put like a blue candle color on it, something like that. So let's see what that would look like. So again, let's say that you had a cleric that has spiritual weapon. So I'm going to turn that stuff off for right now so I don't get confused. And we'll just put this over here so it's separate. And this time, instead of torchlight or something like that, we're just going to give it kind of like an ambient glow. So what we'll do is come back over to the lighting tool and go back to token lighting. And what I'm going to do is change the color to like a light blue. And then drop this down to candle. Change that back to light blue. And then add it to the token. So that should have technically added that color to the token. So let me make sure I did this right. So candle, color change, and let's see, candle, color change. Okay, I had to have it selected. That's what's going on. Okay, so there's that blue kind of color, and then I'm going to do candle, color change, and then add it. Okay, so that should have done it. All right, so now when we go back to play mode and we turn this stuff off, so now you have this kind of this cool glow, this candlelight glow here on the spiritual weapon. You can actually redefine those so you're not stuck with it. But anyways, that was the main thing I wanted to show, is you have all these resources. So you have the map packs, and then you have the actual individual packs that you can get from third-party stuff that on the store, or you can also use this Joy of Painting extension that I'm using. It's free, and that's what this stuff is here. This is what makes this a little easier. What's nice is I have it linked to the map, so if I accidentally close it or I need it again, it's just right there. And you can also put it on your, like over here, I have it as an asset as well. So if I close all this stuff out and I need to get back to it, I kind of have a little cheat list here, so I can bring that up, bring up my palette, bring up the assets. There's all kinds of stuff. And one of the nice things that was recently done to kind of make this window a little bit more useful is that it saves the last thing you were looking for. Whereas before, every time you search, it would reset. That was so annoying. They fixed that, thank God. But they're getting a little bit better. I mean, some of this stuff is annoying, it's not as easy as it looks, but it takes a little practice. But once you understand how to use the assets and kind of how they work together, it's not too bad. Obviously, room for improvement. I hope they build something like this into the interface. I know I mentioned it to Doug, and he said they already had something like this planned. It's just not a priority right now. And then there's some other things that I would like, I'm asking Smiteworks, please do this, or, just try to make it a little bit better for the end users. And that's really what my ultimate goal is. I'm not really here to advertise for them. I really want you guys to be able to utilize what you invested in, and also to understand where the resources are. So anyhow, you guys take care. Have a good week. Tomorrow's Friday, I think. And hopefully I'll see you around. And if you guys are interested, Saturday I'm going to do a stream where I'm going to prepare for like a one-shot adventure. And then Sunday I'm actually going to run the adventure with 4 or 5 GMs and show them my process, and I'll have that streamed as well. So you can see the character creation, the setup, that sort of thing, and then we'll do a combat and we'll call it a day. So that one might be a couple hours or more, probably about 3 hours. But the preview is going to be Saturday afternoon Pacific time, and then the game is going to be the next day, Sunday, at around the same